there are three things that were at play here, right? So you had the device that, in this case, it could be a Google Home, it could be a doorbell at your house, right? So Google Assistant is getting integrated with different devices that you use every day. So you talk to the device, which in turn has the embedded assistant in it, right? And so assistant kind of is the mediator between the user and your action.
Yes, thank you, Kishore. So I'm going to switch over. So high-level view. This is the 90-foot view. There's this idea of the user. There is assistant, which is the conversational API, and then there's your action. Cool on that? Fantastic. So now that we have an idea, the high level, let's go a little deeper in. Cool. So this just mimics the conversation that we had earlier. And so it starts off all the way on the right-hand side. I'm going to be on this side, sorry guys. On the right-hand side, this is the user. Here in the middle, this is the device. So whether it's a doorbell, your cell phone, a home, a smart display, this is Google Assistant. And then this is your action. So this is your server, your webhook that you'll have. So the user is going to say, okay, Google, talk to personal chef. What happens with Assistant? So, sorry, the home will get that information, translate to text, get sent over to Assistant. Assistant uses natural language processing, uses our knowledge graph, uses ML ranking. So similar to search, the general Google search that you use, we use something really similar to that to figure out what's the best application, what's the best action to serve up. After that, it invokes the action that thinks it's best. So that action gets invoked. We send back a response. That's when Google Assistant will go, sure, here's personal chef. There'll be what we call an earcon, which is an icon for your ears. And then I'll ask, what are you in the mood for? User could say, well, it's kind of cold outside, this is what I like. And then the interaction, all Assistant is doing is hearing the speech and translating that to text and giving that to your server. And then you handle that. And all Google Assistant is doing is handling that text-to-speech or speech-to-text. Are we good on that? Does that make sense? Cool.
How does it know it's whether your app or somebody else's app to go to?
So the question was, how does it know whether it's your app or another app? So we're going to go into how it gets invoked in a little bit. So I'm going to put a pin in that because we'll totally address that. And if I don't, tell me. Okay. Cool.
So when you say natural language processing, does it mean like the different cultural, like if I have to say I want a soup, if I was in India, I would have said like get the Ramu to do it. So does
you don't need that
all the AI,
yeah, that point.
does that AI do it? And that's what, or is just taking your voice differences like?
I think you will learn some more about that as we see, and how it's not exact, and we'll get to that in a couple of slides.
Would love to take questions, but because we only have half an hour, we're going to kind of go through
hold
this.
off on the thought, but
yes.
we'll be around. We'll be around the whole day.
Totally.
So we'll be happy to answer all the questions.
Totally. So from the slide before, what I was saying, all you're receiving is the raw speech, right?
Yeah.
So we have to figure out what the user actually wants. And in the demo that we had, this was what Wayne had actually said. He said, well, it's kind of cold outside. I like something to warm me up. I like a hot soup, and I want it fast. For a computer, imagine trying to write a regex expression, trying to pull out what the user really wants, right? That could be really complex. It's pretty hard. We're human. We're a little messy at times. I know I tend to say something backwards because I'm dyslexic, and what's really nice is we have a tool that can help us out, help out the developers, so we're not having to actually figure all of these things manually. So the tool we have is Dialogflow. So Dialogflow does intent matching, and what it does all the heavy lifting. It does all the machine learning, the natural language processing, and it figures out what are the items that we need to be able to extract from the user. What are the things that we need? That way, that gives it to the developer. And then the developer in our code, we could figure out and process and do whatever we want to do. So Dialogflow is a tool that you could use to be able to figure out what the users, what they want from you. And we get to define some of the things that they can do for us or with us.
So there are two things here, right? of interest right in the slide, which is intent, which is what does the user want to do, right? How do the user has expressed it in natural language, but you want to understand what exactly does the user want to do, right? In this case, I want a recipe for a soup. And the entities are, hey, I want something hot, in this case, right? And I want it right away. So these are some of these well, parameters, if you will, to your API.
That's a great word. Cool, so let's show you an example. So this is a Dialogflow console. And so this is an example of how we trained our Dialogflow to figure out the intent we want to give it. And so this, again, is just an example. On the top, you see recipe recommendation. That's the name of the intent we want to give. Because this is like an option that we want to give the user to be able to do. But someone can ask that multiple ways. And so we gave it a list of different phrases that people might ask for our information, or to ask for that action, that ability to happen. And so as you can see, there's a lot of examples. This is not that many, so when you're developing, please put at least 15, because the more training examples you do, the better our machine learning algorithms can operate and really get to the true intent of what you want your user to be able to do.
This kind of answers your question about how people may ask for different things. So even though you have given it some examples, these are then expanded into many, many more, right, through machine learning. So that's where it's able to understand the intent, even though it's spoken in a different way than what is provided.
Cool. So now let's go back to that view of what is happening. So now we have Dialogflow. So really similar. We have our user, we have the surface, the device that we have. This is Google Assistant. And now Dialogflow sits between Assistant and with your action, with your webhook, with your server. And so now what's happening is that raw text, or speech to text, that raw string, Dialogflow will process it, figuring out what the intent is, what the user wants, and we'll send a webhook to, or use your webhook to go, let's call this function that you have described in your server, which is pretty sweet. I still see phones up, so let people take photos. This one's a cool slide. Cool. So, magical experience.
All right. So I know Jessica just mentioned or introduced the concept of webhook. It might be something new for many of you, but some of you probably are very familiar with it. But basically, what it is a cloud function, right? It's basically an endpoint where you provide your action, you implement that action, right? Think of it as an API that you're providing, and it returns back information, right? So, and it's available through a HTTPS endpoint. So that's pretty much what a webhook or a service is, right, in this case. So let me introduce this platform that we have for the Google Assistant called the Actions on Google, right? So Actions on Google is the developer platform if you're building for the Google Assistant. So it's not very different from other ecosystems that you're more familiar with, like Maps and Android and Google Search for that matter, right? So Actions on Google is the platform for building for the Google Assistant. And so wherever the assistant is, as assistant gets added to more and more devices in different languages and in different countries, your action is now getting more and more, you're just building it once using this platform, and it is made available in all these different devices, right? So, and this is what we are going to use today, and you'll be introduced to that soon after this, right? So where you'll be heading into the code lab with Actions on Google. So one of the first things that you want to think about as you get into building a conversation action is the design, right? So you should understand that it's very, very different from the usual design that we are used to, user experience design that you're used to, right? This is, as Martin mentioned earlier, it's a shift. It's a shift from purely a mobile or a web-based UI to something very different, where the user can say anything. It can express what he or she wants in different ways, and our action should be able to handle it, right? So conversation design is something very important, and you should think about it. We have an awesome team inside Google that have put out so many resources out there. I encourage you to check the website that's mentioned here. It includes a lot of articles and patterns based on what has worked and what has not worked, right? So it's very, it's an awesome resource, and please, I encourage you to take a look at it. We also have Kathy, who has agreed to be here later today, who will be talking, she's the head of Conversation Design Outreach at Google, and she will be going into much more detail on this subject after our talk.
But we're skipping that right now and going straight to like the fun stuff.
So, you know, as I mentioned, Assistant is now available on different devices, which also means that some devices, you know, they have different capabilities, right? So you have some devices that have just an audio. Google Home is a good example of that, or your headphones that have Assistant built in them, or a doorbell for that matter. And then others with screens, and such as the device in your pocket, or smart displays, which has an even more immersive display, right? So you may want to think about, when you build your actions, what type of device, it could come from any of these, and you know, so it's something that you should keep in mind when you're building your action. So again, this is getting a little technical here. So as Jessica mentioned in her slide, Google Assistant and Dialogflow, which is a tool, we sit in between, and between the user and your action, right? So once the spoken words are translated and converted to intents, we invoke your action, but you need something more solid that you can work with, right? And the protocol that's followed, that is, you know, when your action is invoked, it's a JSON-based protocol. So Google Assistant converts the speech to text. Dialogflow takes that, converts it even further down to an intent. And that is expressed in a message which is in the JSON format. And we invoke your action or your webhook, which is obviously hosted on a cloud endpoint somewhere. We invoke that with a JSON payload, right? So, and then your action, we expect you to return back JSON in a specified format. Now, you're welcome to implement your action in any of the languages that you are familiar with. It could be that you're familiar with Python, and that's fine, or Node.js or Java and whatnot, right? Because as long as you're able to consume the JSON and produce JSON output out, you know, and specifying and stay with the protocol, it's completely all right? However, it can get a little messy, and it's a lot more tedious to build something directly with that. So we do provide client libraries that kind of abstract out a lot of these things. So think of, so we have one today, which is based on Node.js and JavaScript. And here's an example of, I know it's probably not very easy to read here, but I can just read it out, where you're seeing that, hey, here's a intent called tell fact, and here's how I'm going to respond to it, right? It's very straightforward and simple to use, and you will use that in the code lab today. So, so what are the things that you can do? What type of responses can you produce that back to your user, right? So here's at the very simple level, it would be a text and a speech back. So the text is that if the assistant, if the query came from, or the request came from a device that has a screen, the text is provided to them, and the speech is, so Google Assistant converts this into actual speech and is spoken to the user, right? So.
Yeah, and I just want to make a note that in this example here, it's asking howdy, or the speech says howdy. I can tell you fun facts about almost any number, like 42. What do you have in mind? But the text just says howdy. I can tell you fun facts about almost any number. What do you have in mind? And so you can have kind of different verbiage that happens in the same function that you're reading or response that you're creating. You can have some customization within that. And of course, Kathy's going to go more into detail on how you want to design more for the conversation component, but I just want to make note, it doesn't have to be the same.
And same thing here, that, you know, especially on devices with screens, there is an opportunity to provide suggestions to the user and kind of guide them, right? So if they don't, there might be areas where in your action you may want to provide some kind of suggestions, and that's very easy to do as well. And what are the other things? Let's quickly kind of run through some of the responses that you can provide. So here's a basic card, which looks something like that, with where you can have an image, some text, and a link that links out to more information on your website, and so on. So that's a basic card. We have lists and carousels. If you have, and again, there are some design guidelines on when to use what, but these are available. And yeah.
I noticed people were taking photos. All of these code examples are in our GitHub repo, and that might be a better spot to be able to see, because I know the text is a little small. So
exactly,
it's in our repo, and if you need any support, you can just let us know. We can point you to the right direction. These are just ideas. Like, this is things that you can do.
Yeah, and all this information is available, of course, in the reference.
Oh, we could do that.
Yet another interesting response is the SSML, which is basically that, hey, instead of the voice that's a machine-like voice that's responding to your user and giving, you can have a much more, you can create an ambience, right? So, well, instead of me standing and talking here, why not just show you what that might be like?
Hopefully this example works.
Hopefully.
Sadness. It's okay. So.
All right.
So what?
We'll share the slides so you can hear it. But you want to talk through this and say what it does actually?
Yeah, definitely. So this is just an example of how you could use some of our sound library to really create the ambiance and the feel. So not only can you edit how your voice is going to speak, like adding pauses, making things more elongated, like making them talk a little slower. You can even add noise to it, so you can really create an immersive feeling for your user and be able to really brand whatever your product is too.
Yeah, I mean, so if you have a trivia quiz and you have a correct answer, you can respond with one way versus having a wrong answer. It could be a different sound that can be produced.
Yeah, like ding ding ding. I've spent too much time on this part too. Whenever I build my own app, like, I get too into it.
Yeah, and there are other places in your action where you might want some more information from the user, such as the user's already user could provide his or her name or location, and you want to provide some actions based on that. Obviously, we want to get the permission of the user before we do that, and doing that is also fairly straightforward with the library, where you ask the appropriate permission, and the Google Assistant actions on Google will take care of providing the appropriate question to the user and giving you the answer back. Right? So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I will highlight a few things. The rest of the information is available online as well. You can also connect to an OAuth server or to Google OAuth server itself, so your end users can sign in, and you have a lot more information that's personalized to your action can personalize the experience for the user. And oh yes.
I can't hear you in the back.
Okay, thank you. So the couple of other things is you can also provide goods that you can sell through your assistant. So transactions are a part of it, and so the transactions we also provide a shopping cart, your past orders, and even payments as integrated into the assistant. Right? This is
Yeah, there's just more examples of purchasing, which is fantastic.
I have a question. How can we integrate this chatbot into our application? So we have an application.
Okay. Yeah.
You want to provide the chatbot like
Inside your application. Yeah. It has a longer answer, so let me please ask me after the talk. Okay. The other very interesting use case for the assistant is a smart home integration, right? Whether you're checking whether your doors are closed, or you're turning on and off lights, or setting the right temperature and whatnot. These are all examples of different ways in which assistant is being used to control your devices at home. And this is possible using the smart home library that is part of Actions on Google. And device manufacturers, if coming up with a new device, you could integrate with that, and it's a fairly straightforward process to do that. And of course, this is a favorite of mine. You can also take assistant and introduce that to within any of your own hardware that you might come up with. So here's an example of something where, let's say you have a cocktail mixer. You could combine that, and you could ask the cocktail mixer to make a particular cocktail.
We should have that with us. Like
I
that
know.
should be part of like the after party after events.
I know. I've seen that working,
I
and
know.
I don't know where it is these days.
Want to make rooms. So if anyone builds that and wants to donate,
Yeah.
I can take this one. Yeah, totally. So can you raise your hand if you are a developer and like you code every day? Cool. And then if you don't, raise your hand. Hey, okay, so listen, I'm talking to you guys here. So we have, because we're mindful that not everyone is a developer, and we have a tool called templates. And this tool, you actually don't need to know how to code. You could use Dialogflow and a Google Sheet to be able to get some interaction happening. Right now we have 3 different types of templates. One is personality quiz, the other one is flashcards, and then we have trivia. And so if you are wanting to build something that can be modeled after this is a great tool to use as well.
And I should mention that we are adding more templates,
Oh, yeah.
and this is something that we'll be adding more stuff to.
Totally. What's really nice about templates is that you can make your action within minutes. Like this is a nice, fast way to get something done. It has predefined personalities. My favorite is the robot one, but there's 3, I believe, at the moment. And again, you don't have to use code, you just use a Google Sheet. And you could expand it to different languages with the trivia only. That's what we have set up. So really, really fun, super easy. If you have kids, especially little ones, like this is a great way to interact with them, have them build their own thing too. So we had a question earlier about reaching, like how do you use this thing? How do people find out about the thing that we're building today? And so we have what we call explicit triggers. So somebody can know the name. They go, okay, Google, let's talk to personal chef. And that's one way that you can get to it. There's a thing that we called where you can actually ask a question, and so you're doing all one step. So you go, okay, Google, ask personal chef for a hot soup recipe. And then that way, it's going to take you straight into the conversation and follow it up with your protein, because that's what you need. So there's that way to be able to use your action. And another way is where you go, hey, Google, I want to work out. And that's where Google is going to be using something really similar to how we do search, web-based. It's going to figure out, okay, based off of this, what would the user really like? Let's find out all the actions, which one's the best one. That would be the one that complements, it's in their language, it's kind of in their preferences, and offer them that one. And so there's a way that users could find your action just accidentally, because they just asked for a thing, and your thing was the thing that best matched what they wanted. So you can also find all of our actions on our directory too. So if you're the type of person, like I am not a designer per se, like give me something, I could build it. But me having to figure out how to build, I spend way too much time trying to figure it out. So if you need some inspiration, feel free to go to our directory and you can see all the different actions that have already been built out too. That's an option, but this is where people can find your action as well. And the one I think is the sweetest thing is, let's say you have a business and you want people to know about this thing. Now we have what we call action links, and you can actually have a URL that you can tweet out, you can on Facebook, on all social media platforms, going, hey, we have this action, interact with what we just built. And so this is another way to really drive traffic into your business too.
Excuse me. If you use the action link, does the user need to have a device with Google Assistant, or does it work on the browser?
Good question. So if your user interacted with something that did not have an assistant, let's say, it would take you to the Google Assistant directory.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, that's
I believe
how
so
it
too,
goes.
yeah. Okay, so again, we said this in the beginning. It's a lot of information we're cramming into half an hour. That's why we're going a little fast and not answering all questions, because we want to just give you, these are things that you can do. We'll be actually having a code lab which will walk you through building your first action and building your first intent using Dialogflow. So you'll have something that will guide you through. We'll be here as well. But just some quick reminders that when you're making an action, try to make it where it's a little on the faster side. I know when my mom calls me, and based off of her, she tends to talk a little too much. I zone out. I'm like, okay, mother, okay. And she'll just keep going. So try to treat your action similar to that. You want something that's short, that's quick, that could be like straight to the point. Because we don't necessarily want to just hear a lot of stuff. And again, Kathy will go more into detail about this. You want something to be personalized, to feel personable. So there's a lot of ways that, let's say Kishore used my action. The first time I'm like, hey Kishore, well, hey, I'm Jessica. I do my whole little song and dance. But the second time he invokes it, I might not do the whole spiel. I might be like, hey, welcome back. And then be able to keep going. And so there's ways of doing that too. Of course, always thinking of it in the lens of discoverability. So if you're naming your action something really hard or something really long, it might be a little hard for users to find you. So just be mindful of that. And of course, being proactive. Using the suggestion chips, guiding your user. Like if your user needs, you want something from them, giving them the option of like, hey, do you want something like this? Is always helpful too. And then, this is where I always struggle with this word, ubiquitous? Ubiquitous? Can someone help me out? You guys know what I'm talking about. It's right there. And so just being mindful of having it work on multiple different surfaces. So having it audio only, visual only, and then of course the combination of the two. That's the high level takeaways.
So are we going to cover the practice set, like how to identify the relevant content for users? Are we going to cover
The relevant.
So could you explain what you meant by?
Whatever you have there.
Yeah, so Kathy's going to talk about the conversational design.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be covered in the design.
Cool. So that's why this was really fast.
Yeah, a quick question.
But let's talk. We're going to be on a coffee break. That way we can get you guys coffee because we're going to be starting. That's actually wrong. It should be 11 o'clock. So come back at 11, not 11:25, because you're going to miss too much time.